Welcome to Mystery Week 2020, the weirdest one yet. We've been doing these mystery weeks for a while. I mean, it's a sort of on again, off again thing that MWA NorCal has done. And normally we do these in libraries throughout the chapter area. Normally we have snacks, and if you don't have a snack, I'm really sorry. You should have thought of it. So my name is Lori King. I am the president of the Northern California chapter of Mystery Writers of America. We are running a week-long series of panels on a variety of topics. The whole point of Mystery Week is to get as many of our writers out there that you can meet. And we will have a question period afterwards. I'm sorry that they can't offer you a signature and shake your hand, but a virtual handshake is about it. MWA is the world's oldest and best crime writing association. We have been around since 1945. Our mottos, we have two mottos. One of them is a definition. We empower the professional mystery writer since 1945. And the other one is close to our heart. It is crime doesn't pay enough. So I will step aside. I invite you to join us for all of these events. I invite you to join us as a member of MWA NorCal. We have some of our events are members only, and some of them are open to the public. We're happy to have you, and do write us a note. We have an excellent website, and it has our address on it. So I thank you very much, and I will turn this over to Camille Minicino, who is going to moderate, because Camille is a moderate person. Thank you all.
Thank you, Laurie. And I am moderating from my office, as you see. This is my office right here. This is the Staying Creative panel. Really, how do you do it when things all around seem to be falling apart? So we'll start with some ideas about how to stay creative, but first I'd like to introduce this great panel that we've assembled. So we have Reese Bowen, who is so passionate about research that she suffers through summers in Nice and Tuscany and Venice. Thank you, Reese, for doing that. And I think I'm going to try to go in order as I see you, but I have no idea if that's the order. It's not like sitting at a table. But next to my right is Ann Parker. And Ann is here only in body because she has her 8th book due this week. So her spirit is stuck in 1880s San Francisco. Welcome, Ann. And then next row is JJ Lamb. Hi, JJ. And he was the first to come through with a zinger one-liner. Thanks, JJ. He claims he was born the same year as Nancy Drew, Dick Tracy, and Sam Spade, and that accounts for his writing style. Can we hardly wait? And then next to JJ is Margaret Dumas, who writes books about smart, funny women, and I'm going to insert like herself, who are searching for adventure, love, and the occasional murderer in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm going to start with you, Reese, and just tell us a little more than that one-liner, and also especially about Lady Georgiana, who is it 34th in line for the throne, or do I have that number wrong?
Well, you had it correct at the beginning of the series, but someone's been born since, so she's actually been pushed back to 35th, but she's still she's still right up there. Yeah. So hi, I'm Reese Bowen. I write 2 mystery series. The main one at the moment is about Lady Georgiana, who is a minor royal in the 1930s in England, and they're sort of light satirical mysteries. Occasionally I write another Molly Murphy mystery set in New York in the early 1900s, and recently I've been writing big historical standalones. So those 3 keep me busy. Lady Georgiana, Camille asked me earlier, how did she come into being? And what happened was my publisher kept saying to me, we cannot really break you out unless you write us a big, dark, standalone novel. So I kept thinking, oh, child molesters, serial killers, terrorists poisoning the water supply. And then I thought, wait, do I want to be stuck in darkness with these people? So I thought, what would be the most unlikely sleuth I could come up with? I thought, how about if she was royal? But how about if she was penniless? And it was the wonderful 1930s, poised between two world wars. So I sat down and literally stream of consciousness. I wrote in first person, Lady Georgie. Her voice came to me instantly. And that first chapter, as I wrote it, is the first chapter in the book, actually, without a word change. So I must have got her instantly. And so from there, we're now up to, I'm in the middle of book 15 at the moment. So she's been going for quite a while. At the beginning, she was penniless and clueless and very naive. She's learned a few things by now, and she's snagged a rather nice husband. So she's been doing all right so far.
Thanks, Reese. And I'm going to move and ask the same question of Anne, who has, Anne, I think you're muted. You want me to unmute you, or?
I just did it.
You did. I'm sorry. Okay.
Good. It's okay.
Who knows? This isn't my first rodeo, and it's my 1000th Zoom, but I still, I'm still glad to be here. Every time I come on, I think, whoa, I did it. All right. So thanks, Anne. Inez, how did she happen to walk across your laptop?
Oh my. Well, my protagonist is Inez Stannert. When the Silver Rush series opens, she's a saloon owner in Leadville, Colorado, which was a big Silver Rush town in late 1870s and into the early 1880s. So I like to say she's a woman with a mysterious past, a complicated present, and an uncertain future. And that has continued for 8 books, this poor woman. And how she came to be, well, my grandmother, who is named Inez Stannert, was raised in Leadville, which was something I didn't know until long after she died. And I became very curious. My uncle said, oh, go research Leadville. You're going to find it fascinating. You can set a series there, a book there. So I just did what my Uncle Walt told me to do. I started writing about Inez, who's nothing like my grandmother, except she has a spine of steel and she's not a woman you want to cross. Granny was that way too. And for 5 books, she's been in Colorado, and now she is in San Francisco running a music store.
Right. And your 8th book is on the way to the pipeline. Is that right?
Yeah, I have a few little tweaks to make, and then it's gone.
Right.
Off my desk anyway.
So, JJ, tell us about Zach in Las Vegas, and should I be worried if you ever invite me to a poker game?
Oh, my protagonist is the long version is Zachariah Tobias Rolfe III. And part of that comes from the fact that years ago, when I was a teenager, I worked in the movie theater, and one of the people who worked with me, real name ended with the third. And I found that extremely, one way it's boring, and the other way it's fascinating why people would do that. So anyway, he came about. We were living in Virginia City, Nevada, and I had been selling some short stories, and one of the publishers said, would you do a book using this character? And I said, sure. And we were off and gone and to the races. And fortunately moved out of Virginia City to the Bay Area. And Zach came along with us. So he appears off and on, I think 5 different novels. And of course I had the setting just like Anne, you got all those mountains around you fascinating and you want to write about it in some way or another. And we came to San Francisco, and I had this pesky person that I lived with, my wife, and she kept saying, I've got this wonderful idea I want you to write. And, I tried to explain to her that that's a common question for people in the audience when you're speaking. So
Yes.
you write it, and then we'll divide the money.
And we all know that worked really well for so many books, JJ, and we all miss that. So, but I'm glad you're here today.
I'm afraid so.
So
One day I brought her home a portable typewriter and a ream of paper and said, if you think it's such a good idea, write it. And she did. That was her personality. Yeah.
Yes.
She did. She turned out 360 some pages of manuscript.
Wow. Well, JJ, you gave us a great segue into Margaret, though, with that movie theater, because I wonder maybe if you ever met this person called Trixie. You may not have, you wouldn't have seen her. Do you want to explain that, Margaret?
Well, she's lovely, but she's a ghost. So not everybody sees her. The protagonist of my series, my Murder at the Palace series, or Movie Palace Mystery series, owns a retro classic movie theater, and it is haunted by the ghost of a 1930s usherette named Trixie. And Nora, my protagonist, is the only one who can see her, and Trixie hasn't had anyone to talk to in quite some time, so she has a lot to catch up on.
And one of my favorite paintings is Edward Hopper's. It's a movie theater with the usherette standing against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, but now I can only think of Trixie when I see it. So thanks for that.
Anytime, yeah.
So, back to the title here, staying creative and all this. I'm wondering if any of you have any tips you want to offer for how do you stay creative when it's so tempting to just sort of, I don't know, dig a hole, or maybe that's just me. But
No.
Anybody have Margaret, a tip or?
Well, oddly enough, I'm taking a class on screenwriting through UCLA, because one of the things about COVID is, as we can see, you can take a class from anywhere. So I'm taking a class, and it's 6 weeks of 6 different kinds of screenwriting. So film, TV, podcasts. And I'm finding that thinking of story differently every week is really helping me to figure out what's important in story. It's having me look at what I've done and what I've been thinking of in terms of books. And so, and telling the story in a different format is just sort of like breaking things up a little bit. And it's giving me a little extra energy, a little something different, because I have been in a sort of a creative doldrum, and that has really helped to just try something with a different spin on it.
Right, or just learning something, I imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I find that that thing called a deadline is a very good motivator. I have had, I've been doing 2 books a year. So I had one that I had to turn in June, and then I got the copy edits, and then I got the page proofs, and, so that kept me going on that. But I have another one I have to turn in December. So I have to write whether I feel creative or not. And I'm sure lots of you have found the big problem is we're using so much energy in keeping worry at bay that there isn't the normal amount of energy. John said to me, why do I feel so tired? And I said, well, that's it. You don't want to think about what's there in the background all the time. It's like, the scary music in the horror film. It never really goes away. I've found, luckily, I write books that are set in other places. I've just finished a big book set in Venice in 3 different time periods. And being able to be in Venice, to look at all my photos I've taken of Venice and think, oh, look at that. That's where we found that little, that's been wonderful, because it really is an escape. And, if you can be in another place, in a place where there's no COVID and there's no election, it's really wonderful.
Right. And I think I saw you nod about a deadline. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I'm propelled by deadlines and panic. Only thing is, I've been in a constant state of panic since, February. So it's been very fraught time.
Yeah.
One thing that helped me is, I think MWA does this, and I know Sisters in Crime does. They have set up these Zoom write-ins where at particular times of the day, whether it's 1 p.m. in the afternoon, 5 p.m. or 10 p.m., you click on the link, you go, see the other writers, and everybody writes for an hour. Hi everybody, and boom. And that's great. Like if somebody comes walking into your office while you're working, they see you've got people there and they walk back. So it does provide some kind of focus time. Well, and Camille, you're part of that, so you know what that's like.
You're using us as an excuse, is that it? Or
well,
as a do not disturb time?
Yeah, and it also, it's like that you're there for an hour to write.
Right.
So, and also the other thing that helped was I just really backed off of Facebook for like 2 months, just to the point where Facebook was following me. And somebody has commented, and they're sending me emails, and it's like, Facebook, oh wait. And it helped.
JJ, how about you? Do you have any tips for, or maybe you don't ever feel uncreative?
In the distant past, I scowled at people who said they couldn't find anything to write about because it was my opinion, and you look down on the ground and you see a blade of grass, you can create a story around that blade of grass in some way, and that held me in good stead until COVID, Trump, and the fact that my writing partner died a year ago this week. And I haven't written a word now for almost 2 years, a word of fiction. I try every so often, and the emotions are too much for me.
Yeah.
But I keep working at it. I haven't given up. I keep working at it. And so it's difficult for me to come up with an idea that's creative for you all when I'm having such a problem myself.
Well, good enough, JJ. Yes.
And so I try to get out. Well, at the beginning it was okay because I could get out and go to MWA and Sisters in Crime meetings and see real live people and have human contact. And then the shelter in place hit.
Yeah.
So, here I am with this 4-bedroom house and one person.
So I have an idea,
Must be a
JJ.
story in that.
JJ, maybe we could just all write you a little note and tell you how we miss Zach and just get on it. We're going to try that. All right. So let me ask you all this. There's a question that comes up a lot when we write mysteries in various subgenres, whether historical or cozy or paranormal. Oh, I don't know that Trixie would like that word, Margaret, but I use paranormal loosely here.
Thank you.
And so do you have an agenda as you write? Well, right now, of course, it might be COVID itself, but do you have a social agenda? Are you trying to say war is bad, for example, or, the 1880s were rife with such and such? Would you like to inform or educate, or not that you have to choose between inform and educate and entertain, but where would you be on that spectrum maybe? Or do you ever even think about that?
Well, my only agenda is to get people to watch more Betty Davis movies.
Oh, there we go.
Well, it's interesting. When I started, Molly Murphy to start with, I was just telling some good immigrant experiences and telling a good story. It's funny, as that series has gone along, and also Lady Georgie, it's really tied in an awful lot more to the Me Too movement, because both of my sleuths are young women alone in the world and in fairly vulnerable circumstances. And Molly Murphy became involved very early on in her series with the whole suffragette movement. And we see how young women were treated in one of my books took place in the garment workers industry, and there was something like the Triangle Fire in it.
Wow.
And you saw how those girls were treated. And then Lady Georgie, they're very light books, but little bits creep in all the time. The last book that just came out in August was called The Last Mrs. Summers. And my editor was so worried because one of the characters couldn't keep his hands off the servant girls. And in fact, one of the servant girls in the story at one stage had become pregnant. And she said, oh, this is going to be so repugnant to so many people. And I said, yes, but it really happened. And so she made me write a foreword to say, you will find one of these characters particularly repugnant, because now everybody is so raw on this subject that you have to tread very carefully on it.
Right. Wow, thank you. And certainly, I love when Inez dresses up in man's clothing and goes on an adventure. Tell us how that came to you, sort of.
Oh, well, there's a wonderful book called, it's in my library behind me somewhere, Women in Pants, I think is what it's called.
Really?
And old photographs. I mean, women would dress up as men. There was who was the stagecoach? Woman who drove a stagecoach, and they had no idea it was a woman until she died. Spent her life as a man. And, women did this for various reasons, of course, mostly it gave them access to a wider world, And when I write my books, I was just going to say, I often look for something that resonates past to present. It's like Reese is saying, things that happened in the past, they're still happening today.
Well, like the Silver Rush, you often compare that to.
Oh, well, that's, the Silver Rush, any of the sort of manias like the .com boom. Now I'm dating myself because that's history now. The real estate boom. You think of any of those, I'm going to get rich quick. Now, I don't know. What do you do nowadays to get rich? Oh, we're not going to go there. I just thought, okay. But, the sort of schemes where people just say, he's wealthy, I can do that too. And they rush off and, doesn't happen.
Or silver in the streets, right? Something
Yeah.
Like
Yes. Hey, Anne, I see that Laurie just texted that it was Mountain Charlie who was your.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. Yes, I could not think of the name to save my soul. So thank you.
I keep forgetting to look down at the chat. I'm hoping someone like Laurie will keep us on track so that if someone is trying to talk, we'll see it, because I forget to just glance 20 degrees to my left or right. So, Margaret, are you actually writing a screenplay? Did I hear you say that, or are you just looking at old ones?
Well, no, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to write next. So I have a book, and I'm thinking of turning it into not a screenplay, but I'm kind of thinking a TV series. So
Right.
I don't know, catch me next week when my class is about podcasts, and I'll want to do something with that.
All right. And do you have something you'd like to sort of teach or expose, so to speak, to your audience, or are you just having fun, Margaret?
I'm trying. I honestly can't watch the news anymore. I just cannot physically bring myself to watch the news. So what I'm working on is pretty dark, because I've been in a pretty dark place, it's about overcoming the darkness. So I guess I want to put out a message of positivity. So, you know, working on it, working on it.
All right. JJ, how about you? As far as, pardon me, other tips you want to give us, or do you have something you're trying to teach people about gambling, maybe? What is that about in Las Vegas?
Not so much New Mexico and gambling. I mean, kind of gambling, but more so in the longer series that I wrote with Beth, and which were medical in their basis.
Medical thrillers.
And so we tried to pick out each time a specific thing in medicine and then build a story around that, about
Right.
using new medicines and using new devices. And so there was that as a takeoff point.
And I have an idea. I think you should write a book with it featuring an aeronautical engineer.
Featuring an aeronautical engineer?
Didn't you start out that way?
Yes, I did. I started out to be an engineer and became a journalism major. So
Right.
there's no connection. Other than that the journalism people sat in the student union and had a lot more fun than the engineering students did.
Well, you can just give it some thought, just in case you're looking for something like that. So I always wonder what kinds of scenes come easily to you and what do you struggle through? Or, Reese, don't you have something like 100 books before your mysteries? So
Yep.
Probably nothing comes hard to you, but maybe you could dig something out of all that, in particular kind of dialogue or setting or something that's a little harder than another kind.
I'm very bad at sex scenes. Seriously, I always get the giggles and I can't ever complete them. Because when you think about it, sex is really funny for most people, and so mostly if I have to write a sexy scene, especially for Lady Georgie, something goes very wrong in the middle of it. There's one of my favorite scenes was when she's using her friend's house and her friend really doesn't know this. So the friend arrives back from America unexpectedly and is bringing a man up to her room, and he happens to be a famous politician. So they come up to the room. Georgie is trapped, has nowhere to go. So she goes behind the door and they fling the door open and he starts to rip her clothes off, and panting and everything. And so the door is pressed into Georgie's face and the robe on the door has feathers on it. And Georgie realizes that she's going to sneeze. So suddenly there's this great big achoo. And he jumps up and he holds this little heart-shaped pillow just where it's covering things, and that's my sort of sex scenes.
Yeah.
But in a more serious vein, every book I think I've written is a book that I want to read and it's not on the shelf. And so I think, well, I want to read this book, so I better write it. So that that's the driving force behind every single book that I've written, that I want to read it.
Right, which is much nicer than, having someone come up to you and say, here, write this, right?
Yeah.
So how about you, Anne? Do you have difficult scenes or?
Let's see. Well, the problem for me is not so much a scene, but as a portion of the book that I call the muddle in the middle. Because I tend to, I know how it opens, boom, just about every book I begin, the scene appears to me like in a dream. Oh, let's see where this goes, and away you go. And you go along for a while, and even with the synopsis and everything, it's like, a character walks in, oh, come on in, join the story, and then by the middle, you sort of stand back and look at it all, go, oh my gosh, now it's got to start coming together. And that's always kind of, it's like roller coaster. You go up and up and up, and there's that pause at the top, boom. But it's that middle section that's always kind of painful.
Do you ever have to just kill someone off at that point because you have too many people coming in?
Well, you have taught me that, Camille. So that is a good way to get the roller coaster off the top and roaring on its way.
Oh, there are so many things, I just forget them all. So, Margaret, how about you? Easy scenes, hard scenes?
I always have problems getting the right people into the room at the same time, or managing, like where everybody is at a time. 'Cause I don't extensively outline, but I usually start with a calendar so that I know this has to happen on this day, so this has to happen the day before, and this will happen so I'll like have it sort of, and then it's just that between the things that I know have to happen is where I sort of say, okay, well, how much do I have to tell about walking into work or having breakfast, or it's that level of stuff that always trips me up.
Well, right, and that's where Facebook comes in, right? Because you breakfast everywhere. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
How about you, JJ? What are the hardest or easiest for you?
Easy parts are, of course, the ones that we know about, or has been part of our profession at one time or another, or have been closely associated to. It's right, because Beth and I wrote by the seat of our pants rather than plotting everything out and putting little 3x5 cards all over the wall. It's quite easy to write yourself into a box. And okay, I'm here, and it was fun, and it's interesting, and people are going to enjoy it. And then they're going to say, what happens next? Because that's what we would be doing, sitting there saying, okay, what happens next? And lucky enough to have two of us working on the same story, you start verbalizing, tossing things around. What if this happened? What if that happened? And what if the mouse didn't arrive at the tick of the clock or something? And so those would be the most difficult, and not making mistakes in the medical version of the books.
Right. That would be a little more serious than in other.
Oh, yes. And the last thing we would ever wanted to do was to cause somebody harm, because they said, well, I know that's what you do because I read it in their book,
Right.
I mean, they're stupid to do that in the first place, but still, I would not want that on my conscience.
No, and you don't want a lawsuit either, do you? So.
Right.
There's someone is writing that she or he writes cozies, so they don't have to deal with sex. We're back to you, I guess, Reese. And also kind of to the next question that I have, how do you feel about being categorized, so to speak? On the days when you used to walk into a bookstore, sometimes you would see a big section called mysteries, and the other side of the room was literature. Well, that's the first thing. How about that? Who decided that? But then even within those broader categories, you have cozies and police procedurals or medical thrillers, paranormal, historical, whatever else probably you can think of. Didn't Writer's Digest once give us 32 different subgenres? Children in peril. So Reese, I'll just start with you again, if you don't mind. What about all of these breakdowns and where you fit in? Would you rather someone just said books and here they are?
Yeah, that's always annoyed me. The mysteries on one side and the fiction and literature on the other. What am I, chopped liver? I've had people say to me, actually, so are you planning to write a real novel one day? And I was doing a radio interview once, and there was a rather sort of literary type person interviewing. She said, so how would you compare yourself to a literary novelist? And I said, well, let me give you an example. This literary novelist and I are walking up the steps together, and we're going into the bank, and one of us is smiling.
Very good. Can we write that down and use it?
But I mean, the whole thing is it's insulting because if you look at the top people in the mystery genre, you're getting as fine a literature as you would get anywhere. Because actually, the loss of the killing of a person and the way it disrupts a family and society, that's actually, you're disrupting the fabric of life. And if it's written well, you can't do anything better than that.
Right, right. And how about
May I
you?
tag-
Oh,
may I tag something on
yeah,
to that?
absolutely.
Many years ago, I don't know how many of you know Ruth Cavan, who was an editor and quite a good one. And she tried to start a series. Each one said down in the right-hand corner, a novel with murder. And trying to bring these literature people, sometimes, together with mystery writers, and show that it's writing, and it's either good writing or it's bad writing. So
Yes. If only we could, that would be a nice way to do it, wouldn't it? And bookstore, and you go, one side is bad writing and the other is good writing, and just then track do the tracks.
Yeah.
Margaret, how about you?
Well, it's interesting because I tend to get published my cozy books, but the ones that I think are better and the ones that I put much more of myself into are much darker and no wisecracking ghosts to be seen. But they're not the ones that have caught on. So I don't know. I mean, I love Trixie and I've loved writing this series. But my natural inclination is to be a little bit on the darker side, but still in mystery. I mean, I remember I had read so many mysteries when I was in high school that somebody gave me a romance and I kept waiting for them to find a body. I didn't understand what the point of the book was.
Got it. Anne, how about you?
Well, I say you could call it whatever you want as long as you buy a book in one of my books. You could call it a Western, you could call it women's fiction, you could call it historical mystery. I don't care. The nice thing about historical is it really goes the spectrum from light to dark. I mean, you got the alienist at one end, and then you have very light mysteries that are fun, like Lady Georgina, So you can find something that's almost any temperature that you like. So I like to kind of move up and down the spectrum a little bit with different books in my series, which I don't know, maybe that's not a good idea, but it's fun, Try making it a little darker, a little lighter. So
yeah, what about what you read? It's one thing I always have trouble with. Certain things that I read, I can't write while I'm reading those books. Is there anything that you particularly like to read while you're writing, or that you avoid while you're writing? Like me, I'm always afraid I'm going to copy something, for example. So what are you reading now, say, while you're writing? Not necessarily the book, but what kind of book?
I'm reading an Icelandic thriller right now. That's way off the
Well,
from what I write. So
it's not going to affect you in terms of your own writing, right? Anybody else? It just
I find I can't read fiction when I'm writing because I do tend to, especially if they've got a definite style, I tend to pick up that style. So I have to stay away from that. I found this year too that I went back and read a lot of old favorites simply because this was such a disturbing year that it was comforting to read a book where I knew what the end was going to be. And, I went through the whole Harry Potter series. I went through the whole Narnia series. I went through the Lord of the Rings. I went through every Mary Stuart, and my goodness, they're dated, but they, I used to love them when I was a teenager. And, but they at least they were escapists because they were somewhere else.
Right.
But just recently I read, my friend Jen McKinley wrote a book called Paris is Always a Good Idea. And that was such fun. It was a very light romance in which she goes back to rekindle old romances from her gap year, and just the sort of thing that one needs to read at the moment. I'm staying well away from anything that's going to plunge me into darkness at the moment.
Well, how about research? Does that help get you out of the current quagmire, if you want to call it that. How much do you do? Anne, I'll start with you this time. You hardly any is what I'm thinking.
No, I do lots and lots of research, lots and lots, and one thing that's been really difficult with the book that I just finished is I really love doing boots on the ground research, going to San Francisco and walking around, even though it's changed a lot since 1880, you still get the feel of the air and, the streets that go up and down. I mean, more and more, pretty much the way they used to, the museums and, you can't do that. So, I mean, I've got a really good library of books. I'm on the internet a lot. And I've connected with some experts, I mean, maybe because the national parks aren't open, it's really easy to get hold of an Alcatraz Island ranger who then points me toward, a historian who can answer my questions. So, there have been silver linings, but I really miss getting out and being in the place I'm writing about.
Right. So Margaret, you just go to a theater. I mean, not these days.
Not these days.
Everything.
But no, I've loved doing that. I mean, it's traveling to go to all of the conferences, BoucherCon and Left Coast and everything. I'll always, when I go to a new city, I'll find out where their historic theater is, because just about every city has a movie palace, whether it's fallen into disrepair and it's in a bad neighborhood, or whether it's turned into a church, or the latest trend I've noticed is they turn into gyms and they do climbing walls because they're so tall. Anyway, but so I've enjoyed doing that. Can't do it now, of course. I'm not traveling, but I can always watch old movies and call it research.
Call it research. That's gotta be fun. JJ, do you go to Las Vegas a lot, for example? I don't know why I'm fixed on that.
I think,
So much fun.
well, for me, going to Las Vegas once is more than enough. I've been in Las Vegas, let's see, when was I first there?
You're saying once in
Middle 1950s.
Wow.
And other than the buildings being maybe bigger and more neon, inside and the people that you find haven't changed a bit, in my opinion. Anyway, they're still the people who are spending their last dollar on a slot machine before they go home without the groceries. There are those who dress up and make a big event out of it. There's a zillion books in one casino with respect to characters. But the underlying thing that takes them there, and the decor, and the fact that there were no windows and there were no clocks in a casino,
Oh, yeah.
that hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, right. So
Anyway.
I left you for last, Reese, because I know you're going to tell us all about these incredible venues you visit.
Well, you will notice that I set my last 3 big standalones in Tuscany, in Nice, and in Venice. I do not set any books in Detroit. And like Anne, you have to have boots on the ground. I mean, even though a lot of mine are historical, you just need the feel of that place. And I find each of the places I've done are places I know well anyway, like Tuscany. I've taught a summer workshop there a couple of summers in a row. So I know the place well. But then if I know I'm going to write about it, then I'm very receptive, like walking down a street. What do I smell? What do I hear? And I can hear like a soccer game going on from a radio, and a cat runs across, and I smell garlic, and all those things can bring a thing to life. So last summer, I knew I was going to write the Venice book, and I went back to Venice, a place I do know well. And contrary to what I've just said, I actually worked quite hard. I went into the historical library at the Correa Museum, and I gave them my card and I said, I'm a well-known writer and I'm writing this book set in Venice and this is what I want. And I need to know about Venice in the 1930s and how the Jews were treated and where if the Jews were taken to one section of the city. So I was taken to this little room and I had 2 librarians who kept bringing me books. Now they're all in Italian. I do speak rudimentary Italian. I can speak and read enough Italian, but these were books. They kept coming in with the piles until there's this huge fortress around me of books. And I had to say, I'm really not going to get to more than this, but you must try this one, So I did do lots and lots. What I ended up doing was I would find what I wanted in a book and then John would take photographs of the pages. And so, so when I got home, then I could go through at my leisure, which was good. But so, I do. And then I like to walk. If my characters have to walk from A to B, I like to do that walk just to see what you see. And in Venice, when do I go over a bridge? Is there a little coffee shop there and things? So that was hard this year with no research of any sort, because my research trips are they're fun. They're the sort of bonus part of my life, I think.
Right. So I'm going to ask what you're working on now. I'm not sure whether I'm to take questions. Maybe Laurie can help. One of the Lauries is still around. Do we take questions or nobody's there? There's a curtain, but there's nobody behind it.
No, we're here. We're here. So if anyone out there has a question, please put it in the chat in all caps and we'll get to that. So if you have a question, please ask and Camille will read that.
Okay.
Until then, we're having a great time listening.
Thank you. So tell us what you're working on next. Or the next book, or the next play, the next script, podcast, Margaret.
Well, okay, that's all planning. So what I'm actually working on is it's an adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo. That I've been working on for years, and I'm just about ready to send it to an agent. So that's what's been like occupying my mind. That's when I say I've been going dark, I've been going dark.
Okay.
It's all about revenge for me.
All right. So we do have a question, and I'll ask that before I hear what the others of you are working on next. Is there one writer who inspired you at the beginning of your writing career? Reese, do you want to take that? You can say no.
Strangely enough, yes, there is one writer who made me write mysteries. I'd grown up with all the ladies of the golden age, and I just, they were great. I loved reading them. Never really sort of touched me. They never touched my heart. They were clever puzzles. And then when I had a young baby, I was in a library and I found Tony Hillerman, and he completely blew me away. He not only had a good mystery, but he took me somewhere. He made me feel I was in another place. He opened my mind to a completely different mindset. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to write books that take somebody somewhere and, give them a mini vacation. And so, I started writing my Constable Evans series set in Wales first. But that's what I like to do with every book, is I want to take you somewhere. I don't want to tell you about the past. I want to take you to 1901 or 1930. And I want you to figure, oh my God, I've been teleported back to 1935. That's my aim with every book that I write, really. So thank you, Tony Hillerman. In fact, when people come up to me and they sort of go, I love your books, I'm really embarrassed. And I always think how silly. At one of these conferences, I sat next to Tony Hillerman, and I'm sitting there going, I'm sitting next to Tony Hillerman.
But isn't it, what to me is fascinating is that if I had to guess what writer might inspire you, I don't think it would be Tony Hillerman. No. So that is a really fascinating story. How about you, Anne?
Well, of course, there's the writer who was sharing an office with me at work.
Well, that doesn't count.
That doesn't count. Okay. Then I would say Martin Cruz Smith, when I read Rose, kind of for the same reason that Reese was talking about Tony Hillerman, but Rose, oh my gosh. I mean, it took me to the coal country of England in 1870s and into the mines. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing book. And I think it's one of the ones that not everyone thinks of it when they think of Martin Cruz Smith, but I love that book. And that really was an inspiration to me to set, I can do this. I can well, not that I can write like Martin Cruz Smith, but I can, set a mystery in a mining town.
Yeah, but also it fits in the sense because you're both very detailed. And when you read Rose, you do feel you're down there, just as you feel as though you're walking in Leadville. So yes, I think you've done it. JJ, how about you? Is there one writer who inspired you at the beginning? I know you were a journalist for a while, right? Is there some?
Oh, did you say me? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yes.
Oh, okay.
The journalist in the room.
Journalist in the room. For relaxation, John D. MacDonald. I read every color book that he wrote. His other books, he was blatant sometimes, too blatant. He wrote about the condominiums in Florida. But he got me away from the journalism part where, anything over 2 paragraphs is too long, and somebody said, write a book. And I thought, holy cow, any story I have to tell can be done on 1 page. And I'm through, that's it.
And don't you have to worry when you're a journalist that someone will cut that last paragraph no matter what, if it's too long? So we weren't getting that. So Margaret, is there a writer who especially inspired you? Besides having the name, and you're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, no, let's not. We don't talk about lineage, or lack thereof. No, I think when I wrote my first series, this is going to sound awful because it isn't a writer; it's a movie. It was the Nick and Nora Charles movies. In my first series, I have a married crime-solving couple, and it's very lightweight and banter, and martinis are consumed. But I got it from the movies before I ever read,
That's
source.
yeah.
Allowed. Okay.
Because I think there are writers associated with movies.
There are, yes.
So
yes.
I think that'll work. We have another question. Are there routines that you don't break that help your creativity? Are there routines that you don't break to help your creativity? And someone is writing yay for Dashiell Hammett. No, we have no routine. We are just keeping all our routines, apparently.
Well, I guess is a routine that you don't break that helps
you with your creativity.
I always listen. As soon as I sit down to write, I put on the music, and I always have music going. That's kind of my brain's signal. Okay,
Oh, right. Yes.
I always do that.
And coffee, maybe? Anyone?
Oh, absolutely.
Any other routines that you keep to?
What I do when I'm writing is every morning I go through and edit what I did the day before. And that way you're never looking at a blank screen. You're always you're taken straight into the story, and then you go ahead from there. And the other routine is that I cannot leave until I've done about 1,500 words at the minimum, because I know that I do 2 books a year, and I have to get my first draft done in that amount of time. So if, sometimes those 1,500 words come really quickly, and I go on and I do a few more pages. Other times it's like pulling teeth. I get up, I walk around, I throw a load in the laundry, I walk around the back garden a few times, I come up and get a coffee. But if you know you can't leave until you've done it, you finish it. And that's something I've made myself do during my whole writing life.
I think we're all up to date with laundry these days, at least I am. So JJ, do you have a routine that you keep that gets you into the writing mood, sort of, or reminds you that you're a writer?
I must say, I do not. I wish I did. I wish I were more dedicated to a routine. I wouldn't be as slow as I am if I could do that. I'm too many places at too many times, easily distracted. Like Anne, the first thing that goes on is the music, which drove Bette nuts until she found some music that she liked, and then she listened to music all the time also. Because when we first were doing it, I'd turn on the radio and then her door would slam and then my door would slam and that was it.
Familiar. Margaret, how about you? You have don't tell me it's a martini every day.
No. My books would be either much shorter or much longer. No, but I'm a first thing in the morning kind of person. If I don't do it first thing in the morning, I don't write that day. So what I was doing, well, before shelter in place, I was getting up at 5 so I could put in a good 3 hours before I headed into the office, because I also have a day job. So because it's either first thing or in the morning or it doesn't happen.
Good for you.
So we have another question. Is there a question that you've been waiting maybe for a long time for someone to ask you? Well, are you trying to say I haven't asked all the questions? So, but is there a question? I have this question on my final exams all the time. I ask the students, what question do you wish I'd asked you, and then answer it. So I think that's a correct rephrasing of this person's question. What question do you wish I'd asked? And now you can answer it.
I think you've done very well. I think, yeah.
What's that? I didn't get that, Reese.
I said, I think you've covered a lot of things today.
All right.
I think.
Well, I'm going to tell that to this person then. Here's another one. Let's see. What is the longest time that you've taken a break from writing? I think we already know that as far as what, in a way, that COVID has done somewhat of that to us, at least in some ways broken up our schedules, but and our creativity. But maybe there's some other thought you have on that, taking a break from writing.
I took a 5-year break in the
That's a
middle of
long
the series. I mean, I write as a day job. So it was, I continued writing, but I wasn't writing fiction.
Not writing fiction, right? Anybody else? Break time? I'm looking for another question. I'm not sure. Here's one from Laurie, one of the Lauries. I'll let you figure out which. Laurie King, actually. How do you imagine the stresses of 2020 will show up in your future novels? If they will. How do you imagine the stresses of 2020 will show up in your future novels? Maybe not at all, you don't want to do it, or you just can't help it and you have to write it.
Well, I think Anne and I, as we write about the past, so we will probably not live long enough for 2020 to be history. But I think nobody will want to touch this for a long time, just as nobody touched 9/11 for a long time. It was just too raw in the public consciousness for anybody to want to revisit it. You know, I write a lot about World War II, and people are really interested in that now because it's safely far away. And we also know it was good versus evil and that good won. So in a way, it's a comforting thing. So I think maybe in the distant future, people will write about heroism of this year, and let's hope the happy ending of this year. But I don't think people will want to touch it for a long while.
Yeah, very good point that it's going to take a while before this is history in any sense of the word, and till we see how it ends. And
Yes, the bubonic plague in San Francisco at the turn of the century, 1898 to 1901-ish. That's been on my mind. I mean, it's a little ahead of my characters, but I think one could put a lot of the angst and a lot of the stresses of the current time and do something with that.
But you know, it is a little discouraging that you dated it 3 years running, 1898. So that isn't very heartwarming. Anybody? JJ, maybe you know, with all your the medical thrillers that you've been involved in, does this mean that you would be more likely, perhaps, to take it on?
Answering also as a former journalist, it eventually will be a couple of paragraphs in history books. It didn't take a whole lot of time to weave in the Great Depression and the effects of it and people's thinking and procedures and things that were done. It didn't take really very long on a historical scale for the San Francisco earthquake and fire to be used as background for some other story that's being told.
Yeah, good points. Good point.
I think that's what will happen to it. It doesn't make any difference how much we're suffering right now. Time just keeps doing its thing, and there's something else that was going to become more important the day after they find a vaccine for COVID-19.
And after listing things, there is also Vietnam that is already in our writing a lot in terms of PTSD and other things that happened back then, but we didn't name them the same way. So how about you, Margaret?
Civil War.
Right.
Yeah.
Margaret?
Well, I'm the thing that I'm working on now is a historical. It's set in the 90s. And that's what I'm reading a lot more of now as well. And I just noticed some of the TV shows are coming back and they've got COVID stories, and I am not into it. I am not into it. And I kind of think that you guys, I think we're all saying the same thing, that it's too soon. I don't know how to process it yet, so I certainly couldn't write about it.
So
the thing is, you have, Margaret, you have the mask, and you say, oh, this was filmed recently because all the characters are wearing masks. And so it's kind of hard to ignore when that's happening. And if you see a scene and it's supposed to be today or this week and no one's wearing a mask, you say, why is this? And you're distracted from the storyline.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote one of my books I wrote about 2 years ago has to do with World War I and the Spanish flu. I don't think I could write that book right now because it's so reminiscent of what we're going through. When I was writing it, I was doing my research on how they tried to treat it and how many people died and the fact that it wiped out whole villages in England. And I couldn't write that now. So thank God I wrote it then.
Right. And what Lexa says is it'll be easier to write about when we know the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so true.
So Margaret, can you name those TV shows or offhand or?
Oh yeah, the Connors did one, which is Roseanne without Roseanne, and Blackish did one where one of the characters is a doctor, and so she's a first responder, and her family is home. Sheltering in place. Yeah.
And they're just starting.
Yeah.
Okay. Did I miss any questions? Does anyone who's following the chat see something I missed? If so, please write it in all caps and bold, so I'll see it. And we'll go back to what you're working on now, Tan. So we know what Margaret's working on, I guess, right? And Reese, you're working on 2. We know which 2.
Well, at the moment, I'm doing the next Lady Georgie book, which I was asked to do another Christmas book in the series because the first one, called The 12 Clues of Christmas, had done rather well. So they said, would I do another one? So it's kind of nice at the moment. Well, it's sort of bittersweet to be in Christmas
Great.
spirit, yeah, you know, in England, in a jolly time in England, and then realizing that probably this year I won't be able to get together with my family for Christmas. So it's sort of a bittersweet thing, you know, thinking about my grandkids are back in school in Arizona, and my grandkids here will be coming back from college. So, you know, I can't see either of them really probably at Christmas time. So, albeit outside, but certainly not around the Christmas table with everybody laughing as we normally do. But no, it's kind of nice to be in a comforting Christmas setting, even though there are a few bodies turning up already.
Right, right.
Hang them on the tree.
Hang them on the tree. Yeah, good.
So, Anne, I know you're only thinking of book 8, but there's got to be book 9 in there somewhere.
Oh,
No, all right.
well, actually, I've been thinking it'd be fun to do some short stories or something. And I'm a big fan of eBay, looking at objects from the past, but then I get sort of sucked into it. So I bought a little Chinese snuff bottle, and I think I'm going to write a story about this snuff bottle, 19th century.
Oh, great. Yeah.
We'll be watching. So I just want to thank all of you very much for coming this evening and sharing and giving us all inspiration. Any writers out there, I'm sure feel a lot better and will go and leave this panel and start writing again. So thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you, Camille.
Thanks, Camille.
Camille, thanks everyone.
Yeah. Stay safe, everyone. Okay.
Yes, good idea.
Thanks, everybody.
Fellow writers.